Welcome to Rotoviz Radio. You are listening to episode 49. My name is John Moore, and with me is Matt Friedman. Matt, how's it going?
It is going well. I am excited for the 49ers episode. Not just a player, an entire franchise, the 49ers episode. Actually, one thing that I think is pretty interesting, if you look at Sporting News, they will say that right now the best active player wearing the number 49 is none other than the 49ers' own fullback, Bruce Miller. So there you have it, the 49ers episode. We'd like to thank our guest from last week, Emery Hunt, a fantastic guest, a great podcast last week. And also we'd like to thank the listeners. It'd be pretty boring to do this if we didn't have anyone listening. So thank you to the listeners.
Indeed. And hey, Matt, I don't know if you know this or not, but this is like a triple dose of thank you this week because we are going to hit an exciting milestone with this episode. At some point, someone out there will make this the 100,000th play of the podcast, which is just totally insane, totally humbling. Matt and I are so thankful for the support, sharing a little bit of your week with us, engaging with us on Twitter. It's been a fun ride, and we are going full steam ahead. So again, thank you very much. Getting into this week's episode, up first, we have Matt Papson from Reality Sports Online. He's a former salary cap guy for the Eagles. We have a fantastic conversation with him. Followed by Sharona, who writes for NFLfemale, talks about the 2015 free agent period and the Tennessee Titans. It's an exciting episode, and we'll get to that one shortly. Before we get into it, Matt, I do actually have one more announcement, and that is last week we raffled off a free year's subscription to Rotoviz. All you had to do to be entered was to go to iTunes, leave a review and a rating, and then just attach, a Twitter handle or some way we can follow up with you on there. This week, we're not going to raffle one off, but everyone who has written one recently or will in the next 7 days will be entered. Next week, we'll raffle off another free subscription to Rotoviz. So be sure to head over to iTunes, leave a review, and maybe next week you will have free access to Rotoviz. So with that, Matt, do you want to kick us off with something that you noticed in the news in the last week or some thoughts you've been having?
Yeah, actually, I want to talk a little bit about wide receivers. I've been doing some thinking and I know you've been doing this as well, looking back at your analytical process and specifically thinking about Odell Beckham Jr. One thing that's really kind of struck me about the process that I use is that it's kind of focused on if you make a mistake, you want it to be one that you can live with. And I think it goes to the idea of you want to know the type of prospect that you're drafting. And so in looking back and wondering how it is that a lot of the metrics guys missed so badly on Odell Beckham, I think part of the problem is that there really isn't a historical precedent for the type of wide receiver he is. So if you look at the other guys around him, like Sammy Watkins, Mike Evans, Jordan Matthews, Kelvin Benjamin, even Brandon Cooks or Devontae Adams, there are guys who have been similar to them as prospects entering the league, but there really wasn't anyone similar all that much to Odell Beckham Jr. And so it's funny just kind of looking back and thinking like, well, was there something wrong with the process? But I think a lot of it has to do with the idea of having a certainty of the type of player you're drafting and how that guy might project to the NFL. So that's just, something I've been thinking about recently.
Yeah, and when I was updating my wide receiver database with the new combine information, I went back and I was kind of looking through my different projection models and seeing, how I liked guys from recent drafts, 13, 14, etc. And one thing that I noticed in the past, but I don't know, this kind of fell through the cracks a little bit, is that Odell Beckham is actually like a top 35 wide receiver prospect for me since the year 2006. The problem with that is that he's behind 6 other guys from 2014 who I really liked. And so it's just kind of interesting that in retrospect, maybe it was just kind of like a perspective thing as far as liking someone in the absolute prospect universe versus just liking them compared to his class. Because, I wouldn't change my mind as far as Devontae Adams is a guy I really like. Brandon Cooks, Mike Evans, Sammy Watkins, Allen Robinson, Jordan Matthews. Like, those are the guys that I had ahead of him last year. And it's like, I don't feel bad for any of those things. Like, yes, it sucks that I missed on Beckham. But, in an absolute sense, he does, did grade highly for me, looking back over the last 9 or 10 years. So I don't know, just something that I was thinking about and wanted to bounce off you, Matt. So with that, I think we should just go ahead and get into this week's episode. As I mentioned, up first, we've got Matt Papson to talk about free agency and reality sports online, and also Sharona from NFLfemale to talk about the Tennessee Titans and some movers in this upcoming offseason. Let's get to it. Please welcome to the show Matt Papson, who you can find on Twitter at Reality Sports On. He is a former salary cap analyst for the Eagles and currently president of Reality Sports Online. Matt, how are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks so much for having me on.
You bet. Thank you for your time. So just to get started, would love to hear about which of the recent roster moves, whether those be cuts, franchise tags, etc., that you have found most interesting.
Sure. Well, starting with kind of what happened today, the franchise tag window has been open for a little while, and nothing really had happened up until the deadline today. And there was a lot of speculation on a number of players that would receive the tag. And I think in the end, just the 5 who got it, I think it's a lot less than what most people were expecting. But the fact that Devin McCourty didn't get the tag, I think a lot of people were expecting that. But I think this really means that they're going to make an effort to sign Darrelle Revis, and McCourty will probably get to walk.
Got it. So, revisiting your days with the Eagles, can you explain to us a little bit about what life is like as a salary cap analyst? What did your day-to-day look like, particularly in kind of the peak seasons of, draft, during the season, then the off-season, which we're in right now? And then how did you or your department collaborate with maybe the front office or the coaches? If you could lend a little insight there, that would be awesome.
Sure. So to start, I was a very, very low man on the totem pole. So I wasn't privy to, some of the really high level conversations between the coach and the GM, obviously. But as far as my day to day, the first thing always when you come in the morning, you look at the NFL transactions from the previous day and you see what contracts were signed, and you value those to put into kind of the team. Every team keeps track of a contract marketplace, and NFL contracts are anywhere from 1 page to 60 pages, depending on who the player is and how complicated the contract is. And essentially you have to take all of that writing and you have to put a numerical value on it in a number of different categories, and you kind of figure out what are the reported numbers, what are the real numbers, and where does that fit within the marketplace for each position. And the market is kind of constantly evolving, so that is a really big portion of the job. And then also doing a lot of projects around how other teams are spending their money, position allocations, expected extensions, expected free agents, pretty much everything you could imagine that could be beneficial for a team at some point. The low man on the totem pole is usually doing the background research on those projects.
Man, it sounds like it would be a really complicated and busy job to have, and especially just to kind of extrapolate that to the team, managing the total cap. What do you think is the biggest challenge in managing the cap, and are there any strategies you think work well in handling it?
Sure. So the biggest challenge is that it is a fluid dynamic, meaning that especially around free agency. So there's all this time building up to it, but then everything that happens, or at least the majority of the big transactions, all take place within a couple of days, and some of them within a few hours. And you're not going to get every free agent you want. You don't know exactly how things are going to play out. And so, moving from player 1 on your list to player 2 on your list, all of those things are kind of happening at the same time. And so teams build out multiple scenarios so that they can be prepared, depending on how things break when the gun goes off. And that kind of fluid element is really the biggest challenge, because it's impossible to predict how all 32 teams are going to react. And general managers have a lot of conversations with agents in the, time leading up to, really important periods, but it's still, you never really know until the ink is dry, what's going to happen.
One particular player I'd like to hear about, a guy who at this point is a free agent, who wasn't franchise tagged, is Eagle Jeremy Maclin. If he doesn't end up back with Philadelphia, do you have any idea where he might sign?
That's a really good question. Because Dez and Demarius both got tagged, depending on who you ask, either Maclin or Randall Cobb will be the top free agent wide receiver on the market. And I in particular think that Maclin has probably the ability to succeed in more offenses than Cobb would. Historically, wide receivers changing teams in free agency haven't had a ton of success, but there are a couple of teams. The Browns actually come to mind first. So the Jaguars, the Browns, and the Eagles will have the most salary cap room this year when you include rolled over space. And so I do think it's possible that he will return to the Eagles, but the Eagles had offered him a 5-year contract last year, and instead he chose to make a bet on himself, and he played under a 1-year deal, and now he has a chance to reap the rewards for that. So I don't envision a hometown discount, but I would say the Browns and maybe even the Panthers would potentially be good fits for him.
Got it. And then just a note on that, if he does leave, do you have any thoughts on Josh Huff, who Matt and I both are, fairly high on?
It's hard to say. It's hard to say how he would fill the role of Maclin, or just kind of being promoted within the Eagles offense. I think he's a very talented guy. It's hard to know how he'll do if he were receiving anywhere close to starter reps. Mm-hmm. But I'd be curious to hear why you guys are high on him and how you think he's going to project if Maclin leaves.
Yeah, I mean, Matt Friedman, I'll just jump in real quick. I think it's a matter of him having a pretty strong final college season, him being athletic enough, and the fact that Chip Kelly drafted him even after taking Jordan Matthews in the second round. The fact that, they took him on the third, I think is kind of a signal that there's something about him that, they have fairly high expectations for his contributions.
Yeah, and I'll just add in right there, even though he was, I think, 23 as a rookie, so a little bit on the older side, physically he was very similar to Maclin, similar size, similar athleticism when he entered the league. And as John said, he did very well in his final college season. And the fact that he has that familiarity with Chip Kelly, and Chip Kelly seems to have the trust in him, the trust to make him a top 100 pick, again, after drafting another highly touted wide receiver, that would seem to suggest that Chip Kelly is kind of, I guess, stockpiling for the future.
No, I could totally see it. And, now that Chip really has kind of full control over player personnel, it'll be really interesting to see if a pattern develops of bringing in his own guys.
Mm-hmm. So we're talking with Matt Papson, who you can find on Twitter at Reality Sports On. So transitioning to your current work, can you tell us about Reality Sports Online and explain a little bit about the void that you think it fills in the fantasy market?
Sure. So in 2012, my now business partner and I left the Eagles to build a fantasy front office platform. And we believe that the core fantasy consumer wants to recreate the feeling of being a general manager. In some sense, everybody who plays fantasy likes the idea of running their own team. But there hasn't been a lot of innovation in fantasy outside of daily games in the last 20 years. And while daily games are great for an instant fantasy fix, it doesn't really reach kind of the core consumer for fantasy, the one who wants to recreate the GM experience. And so we built a platform that allows fantasy owners to build and manage their fantasy team like a real life general manager.
Definitely. I know Matt and I are two of those guys who live and breathe this year round, real life and fantasy. So certainly interesting there. One of the differentiating features that I've noticed is the free agent auction room, which is obviously kind of a timely thing. Can you tell us about that and why it's such a draw?
Sure. So our free agency auction room is the first live online multi-year contract offering platform. And so essentially we've tried to take NFL free agency and apply it to fantasy. So up to 32 real owners can be in the room at one time, and a algorithm acts as a player agent sorting through contract offers. So if I offer a guy 1 year, $5 million, you can offer him 2 years and $8 million. And as new offers come in, every owner in the room is presented with a set of offers that the player values more highly than the current offer. So kind of just like in real life, the offers go up in real time, and eventually when the price gets too high and all the other owners bow out, you can sign a player to a single or multi-year deal. And those multi-year deals have guaranteed money attached. And if you release a player prior to the expiration of his contract, there are salary cap consequences for that.
Matt, I just have to say, I think your site is amazing. It seems like a great combination between the auction format and the dynasty format. And as John said, we basically live and breathe the dynasty format. So this is fantastic. One thing I noticed on your site was that fantasy GMs can't offer contract extensions. There's a great explanation of this on the site. I was wondering if you could kind of dive into that a little bit.
Sure. So we are actually working on an option for commissioners to allow extensions, but for now, no extensions, and that is essentially because you want the most talent possible hitting free agency each year, and you need kind of live owners valuing the players. And so, there have been sim games for a long time with somebody playing against a computer for trying to recreate the GM experience. And, part of the reason people love fantasy is because of the camaraderie and the sense of community. But in this case, it's also because that's who you're competing against. You don't want to be competing against the CPU. So, each year, the available players, their market is set by real live owners who are making offers to those players.
Makes sense. So, in terms of feedback from current users of reality sports online, what do people find to be most challenging, but also probably most rewarding part of adapting to such a comprehensive fantasy football experience?
Sure. So, I would say that, one, people love it. So as soon as people try the free agency auction room, they're hooked. In a lot of cases, people have either stayed away from Dynasty or are afraid of Dynasty because it's assumed that it's really time consuming. So until now, if you wanted to do a salary cap dynasty, or even, almost any kind of dynasty format, can be pretty time consuming for the commissioner as people add their own layers of realism. And so even though our game might sound complicated, its best feature is its overall automation. So even though there are contracts and guaranteed money and salary cap acceleration and franchise tags, all of the math is calculated automatically. All owners are presented with clear choices for decisions that they have to make. Those decisions can be tough, but they are easy to execute. And so the overall automation of the platform is definitely something that people really enjoy. It saves a lot of time for commissioners.
Sorry, one quick follow-up on that. You mentioned how quickly everything can be automated. I'm wondering within the system if things kind of mirror the NFL. So, for instance, like today, the NFL announced that next year's salary cap is $143 million. Does that get automated into the system on your website?
So, believe it or not, we actually did adjust the cap to $143 million today. And we were waiting for the NFL to announce the salary cap before we officially announced our reopening. So your league doesn't necessarily move side by side with the NFL. So you kind of go, you still go at your own pace. It's still fantasy. But yeah, each year the available salary cap moves with the NFL salary cap.
Awesome. Thank you for that. And then one last question, then we'll let you go. Just looking ahead to free agency, would love to hear one bold prediction that you have for a player or a landing spot.
Sure. So I guess I would say that my favorite available free agent is Michael Crabtree. And so even with all of the big names that are hitting free agency, wide receiver or not, I like the value that Michael Crabtree brings to the table. I think he would look great in Eagle Green. Don't know for sure where he's going to land, but he's definitely my favorite free agent. And I think if Macklin walks, there's a decent chance that that Michael Crabtree will end up an Eagle. And then one other one very quickly, I just have this feeling that Ndamukong Suh may end up being a Raider. A lot of talk today about him not receiving the franchise tag, although it was going to be virtually impossible for Detroit to do that. I think that there's a chance that the Raiders break the bank for Suh.
Got it. Well, Matt, really appreciate your time. And, for anyone who's listening to this, curious to learn more, if you want to head over to realitysportsonline.com, check out the site. Right when you get there, there's a great demo on the homepage. Get you up to speed real quick on everything. We'll link that in the show notes. Also, if and when you sign up for the site, if you want to use the promo code Rotoviz to get a 10% discount for your team and or league, fantastic offering to have over there. And again, if you use Rotoviz, as a promo code. You get a 10% discount when you sign up. So Matt, thank you so much for your time. You take care.
Guys, thanks for having me. Hope we can do it again soon.
Hey guys, thanks for having me on. My name's John. I'm from San Diego, and I've been a Rotoviz reader for a couple years. I've gotten at least one championship under my belt just because of you guys, so I really appreciate it. I guess a little bit more about me. I recently graduated from law school in Indiana, and I just took the California bar, so fingers crossed. Anyway, I was calling in today to ask you guys about breakout candidates. Maybe like a running back and receiver who weren't in the top 30 last season, but you think have a shot of cracking it this year.
Yeah, I'll jump in here. One running back that I'm excited about, we liked coming out of school. He basically had a redshirt rookie year and then flashed at the end of last year, is Latavius Murray. I think for a couple reasons, people still might not be on his case to the extent that they should be. For one, he plays for the Raiders, so that's already a little bit of a mental block, I feel like. For two, he came on late last year, and the Raiders in their regime transition aren't being clear on their intentions as far as what they're going to do as far as competition for Latavius Murray. And so I think that will ultimately keep his price down until he does something, crazy in the preseason. But for now, I like him as a running back candidate. Matt, what do you think?
Yeah, obviously I like Latavius Murray a lot. I think he's got, top 10 potential, not just top 30. One guy I really like is Roy Halou, and he flashed a few years ago in his rookie season. He had actually over 1,000 scrimmage yards. And then now 3 Alfred Morris seasons later, he's a free agent. He really is kind of like the original Kristen Michael. Like, he has that type of raw athleticism, but unlike Michael, he's actually had some production in the NFL. He's a fantastic receiver. I think he has the ability also to be a pretty strong workhorse running back. For me, he's the guy. I think he's someone that will go overlooked a lot until free agency, and then maybe he'll see his stock go up when he gets signed to a team that doesn't have a clear workhorse runner.
Mm-hmm. And then at the wide receiver position, a guy that I loved last year coming out as a rookie, not Allen Robinson, but I love him too, Brandon Cooks. He landed in a great situation with the Saints, had a few kind of flashy moments, in the preseason and then in the season, but he ended up on IR, missed a lot of the year. I think that Brandon Cooks is really just a spectacular prospect. I think he can be lethal from all over the field, and I'm excited to see what he can do with a full offseason, for Sean Payton to figure out how he wants to use him, and then another year of getting acclimated to life as a professional.
Yeah, Brandon Cooks is fantastic. I'm right with you there. My guy is going to be a little more obscure. I'm going with Quentin Patton on the 49ers. He was a 4th-round pick a couple of years ago coming out of Louisiana Tech. No one really remembers who this guy is, but he had pretty strong production in college. I think he was, just big enough, just athletic enough at his combine. He was injured his rookie year, so didn't get much playing time. But this is more of a situation where the 49ers have such limited talent on their wide receivers that I could see it being like a Brian Hartline, Harry Douglas situation where like someone has to catch the ball, and maybe this could be that guy. Especially if Anquan Bolden regresses with another year of age under his belt. So this is like a long shot, but I think probably like more realistic than anyone would think.
Yeah, and it's funny you mentioned him and people not remembering him. The one memory that I have of Quentin Patton, like early in his career, is that after he got drafted by San Francisco, he bought his own plane ticket, flew to San Francisco, rented a car, drove to the Niners facility, called Jim Harbaugh on the way, and Harbaugh said, "What are you doing? You can't come here yet. I can't talk to you. You have to turn around and go home," because he wasn't allowed to report until the rookie minicamp. So that will be my lasting memory of Quentin Patton if he does nothing else in his career. But maybe, as Matt said, we'll get something out of him. So, John, did you have any thoughts of your own on potential wide receiver running back breakouts?
Yeah, I do. Mine are based on, basically nothing, as I don't have any real credentials. But I really
that
like
makes 3 of us.
I really like Jerick McKinnon in Minnesota. I was really waiting for him to have a shot last year, but Matt Asiata just really stepped up and played that John Kuhn role. But it's really looking like Adrian Peterson is not going to be back in Minnesota. And if you don't follow Minnesota football, you might not realize that the Minnesota offensive line was plagued by injuries. So I'm thinking with a healthy line, Peterson out of the picture, and hopefully a legit timeshare with Asiata, McKinnon can really have a chance to show his stuff and take the reins.
I like it. Good call there. And then wide receiver?
This one's kind of obvious. I feel bad, but Dante Moncrief is going to have a monster year. Like, he absolutely is. And he's not being drafted according to that right now. Last year, he was behind T.Y. Hilton, Reggie Wayne, Hakeem Nicks, Dwayne Allen, Kobe Fleener, even Ahmad Bradshaw. And I think a lot of those guys aren't going to be in his way this year. I think it's Hilton and then Moncrief. So in an offense like Andrew Luck runs, he's just going to be scoring a lot of points.
Hey, don't apologize for Dante Moncrief ever. Just you rep him all day, every day. So, Matt, did you have something?
Yeah, it's actually pretty funny. One of the first articles I ever read by John Moore was on Dante Moncrief. It was a bowl game preview, and it was about how awesome Dante Moncrief was, even though he couldn't enter the NFL for another year. And one thing that actually strikes me is both of your guys are athletic marvels, which that makes sense. If you're going to speculate on guys who haven't broken out yet, you speculate on guys who could break out big. So I like both of those calls.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me on, and I really appreciate it.
And thank you, John. And if you're listening to this and you're curious about Rotoviz, if you head over to rotoviz.com/radio, you can get access to the site for just $17 for the year. That's a discounted price for listeners only, so everyone else who doesn't listen to the podcast and isn't as cool as you doesn't know that. It's just kind of our way of saying thanks and trying to be helpful to you all. So with that, let's get on with the show. Please welcome to the show Sharona, who you can find on Twitter at sportsbysharona. She's a blogger at sportsbysharona.com, an NFL reporter for NFLfemale, co-host of the NFLfemale Zone Blitz video broadcast and the Game Over Sports Show on Yahoo Sports Radio. How are you today?
I'm wonderful. How are you?
Doing fantastic. Thank you for your time. So last week you did an NFL Combine recap over at NFLfemale. For you, what was the story of the Combine?
Oh, there's so many. Obviously, you can't. The quarterback position is so important, and it's kind of a sexy position, so it's hard to escape that. And I think that you have to go with the whole, is it Marcus Mariota or is it Jameis Winston? Who's better? Who's going to get drafted where? I think that obviously that is going to occupy a large part of the sport, the football world anyway, the NFL world, until the actual draft does take place. There are a ton of good wide receivers in the draft. There was a great story about, I believe his name is Byron Jones, a kid who, whose NFL dream might have looked like it was going to be derailed, and then he, did very well, and is going to obviously get a lot of looks. So, there are a lot of great stories. It was an interesting combine this year. It sounds like they're going to take a look at maybe trying to improve on it. So I'm excited to see what changes they might, come up with. But I think the quarterbacks overall have to be the most talked about part of the combine this year.
Got it. Well, switching over to something that is a little bit more timely with where we are with sort of the free agent offseason signings. We're coming up on that window. Currently, there are a lot of older running backs who are in the free agent pool. Guys like Frank Gore, Reggie Bush, D'Angelo Williams, Steven Jackson, and so forth. Is there any reason to be particularly optimistic about these guys going forward? Is there anyone in that bunch that stands out to you?
Maybe Justin Forsett. simply because he doesn't have as much mileage on the tires, as some of these other guys. I think that what he was able to accomplish last season was it was pretty impressive. The other guys are all, maybe not Reggie Bush, Steven Jackson, Ahmad Bradshaw when healthy, D'Angelo Williams, Frank Gore. They're all players who, in their prime, were workhorses. They were the guys who got the majority of the touches. And so I think that, we're seeing, there's been a lot of talk about the devaluation of the running back position. It's going to be interesting to see what does happen with these older guys. You saw, and Chris Johnson is out there too, which is kind of interesting. And, you don't typically think of CJ as an older running back, but he's getting up there too. He's going to be 30. I believe his birthday is in September, maybe. He's a Libra. I'm pretty sure Chris Johnson is a Libra. How's that for a woman's answer right there? It's going to be interesting to see what teams do with these guys. Steven Jackson, a little dinged up last year. D'Angelo Williams has had trouble staying healthy. Ahmad Bradshaw, the same thing. Frank Gore is really, and Justin Forsett, those are really the two guys who have kind of managed to stay healthy. So, but Frank Gore is, again, he's a guy, he's got a lot of mileage on the tires. The 49ers, as well they should have, but, they ran him a lot. So it'll be interesting to see. I tend to think that Justin Forsett might be a guy that gets a little bit more interest just because of that. But all of these guys, I still think have some football left in them, and I wish them the best, and I hope that they do get some interest from NFL teams.
And it would certainly make sense that Justin Forsett would have a little more popularity in the market than some of those other players, if for no other reason than he's been more productive than any of those guys most recently. But
exactly.
Moving to the wide receiver position, there are some pretty good wide receivers available in free agency who weren't franchise tagged. So guys like Randall Cobb, Torrey Smith, even Michael Crabtree. The NFL today just released their salary cap numbers for next year. The cap will be $143 million and change, and there are a few teams that have a lot of cap space. Do you think any of them are going to go after some of those wide receivers? What do you think will happen to guys like Randall Cobb and Torrey Smith?
Yeah, I think so. And Jeremy Maclin didn't get tagged either. There is a minimum spending level now with the new CBA and with I'm not sure. I didn't go back and look, but I'm sure that there are teams out there that aren't close to realizing their spending limit. And it has to be. It's over, I think, a 3-year period, and that only went into effect, I think, in 2012. So we're getting ready to hit that level and that time span. And so I think that you will start to see certainly the teams that aren't there yet, that aren't close to being at their spending level, start to spend some money. I think Randall Cobb is going to garner a lot of interest among NFL teams. He's a guy, he's had some injury issues, but when he's healthy, he's a fantastic player. He's a guy that you can use in a variety of situations, very versatile. Although the Packers really they didn't do that. Maybe they had some concerns about keeping him healthy. They didn't do that much last year, but you can run him out of the backfield, in and around. He's got a lot of versatility. I think for that reason, he's probably going to get maybe the most interest. But these other guys might not have the monetary desires, that a Cobb or even a Maclin might want. So, the Titans just hosted Jacoby Ford, and so there are going to be, I think, teams that will want to, shall we say, get in on the bidding wars.
Makes a lot of sense. Transitioning to the quarterback position, it's very rare that a franchise caliber quarterback will actually hit free agency, and that is definitely the case this year. The only minorly intriguing guys on the market are some guys like Mark Sanchez, Ryan Mallett,
The Sanchez!
Jake Locker. Yeah, definitely not the Sanchez. A dearth of quality quarterbacks. Do you think any of these guys can actually be decent short-term options in the NFL?
Yeah, all three of those names are kind of good exercises in getting drafted into the right situation and being able to stay healthy too. Mark Sanchez in some games, with the Philadelphia Eagles last year looked good. Other games not so good. We saw some regression to the Jets quarterback Mark Sanchez, who obviously didn't realize his potential there. Jake Walker, to me, of course, I'm cover the Titans, and I'm probably the most familiar with him. He is a guy that I'm going to be watching very closely. A guy that when he's healthy, you see the talent. He's got talent. He's definitely a guy that can make plays. Our team's going to be willing to take that chance. He's going to want to go to a situation where he can compete. Maybe even a situation that that realizes his talent. We speculated with Seattle. Seattle does have a stable of quarterbacks there, but would there be some interest? He's very much in that Russell Wilson frame, and that Russell Wilson kind of mindset. He's a guy that can make plays with his legs. He does look to throw the ball down the field. He's from Washington. He played at Washington. So, I don't know. I don't know where any of these guys are going to land. But if you look around the league, there are a number of teams that are that they may have a starting quarterback, but they don't have their backup situation very well in hand. The Texans are one that comes to mind. They've definitely got an interesting situation. There are other teams too. So I do think that they're going to draw interest. The Texans might, take a look at Ryan Mallett again. Right now, I think that we're in a period where teams are letting guys test the market, kind of see what their market value is. I think that you're going to start to see, even without the use of the franchise tag, I think that you're going to see, teams that were able to get their free agents under contract before that time period expired, still be able to retain their services after they test the market and see what the market value is.
We're talking with Sharona, who you can find on Twitter at sportsbysharona. So transitioning to the Titans, who you mentioned and you've been covering since 2007, let's talk a little bit about them. They have the number 2 pick in the upcoming draft, and there are some reports that they're willing to pass on a QB because they like Zach Mettenberger that much. How accurate do you think those reports are?
Well, with a lot of, it's silly season right now. There are a lot of smoke screens. There's a lot of misinformation that gets traded at this time of year. Teams typically don't want to, show their hand and let other teams. Maybe not nearly as with the number 2 pick. Either the Titans are going to have suitors for that if they want to trade out, or they're going to have, their board is going to be pretty well set, is what I'm trying to get at. And I know how the Titans used to do their old draft boards. We're into a new regime, sort of, and it's kind of hard to get a feel for what the Titans may or may not do. But from what I understand, they utilize a multi-board as well. But when you have the number 2 pick, you're sitting there behind the Bucs. The Bucs are probably going to take a quarterback. It looks like they're going to take Jameis Winston, unless they trade out, which, who knows? Other things have and could happen. But, for the Titans, their board's going to be pretty well set when they're picking at number 2, unless they get, a trade offer. So I think that they do like Zach Mettenberger. If they were to draft one of the two quarterbacks, you know, and not, I don't want to get into the off the field stuff, but I think that it would be Jameis Winston simply because Marcus Mariota is not the kind of quarterback that Ken Whisenhunt likes. He had that kind of quarterback in Jake Locker. He didn't want Jake Locker running. Ken Whisenhunt likes your drop back pocket quarterback. That's where he's had the most success, and that's what he looks for. They have that as that Mettenberger. So will they take that number 2 pick and draft Jameis Winston if he's there? I think at that point the off the field stuff does come into play for them. They have other needs too. Leonard Williams is a guy that I know that they're very high on, and he's definitely, I think, worthy of that spot in my opinion. He's worthy of that spot, and they could certainly not go wrong taking him. Would they? You know, it's kind of been a little bit of there's sort of a knock on taking a wide receiver when you saw what happened with the Detroit Lions. But I think that they could possibly look at a Kevin White or an Amari Cooper at that spot too. They've got Justin Hunter. He's a guy that they like. And I like Justin Hunter. I went to school at Tennessee. I'm very, very familiar with him. He's just still struggling. Nate Washington's going to be a free agent. You know, they haven't shown a lot of interest in him, so wide receiver could be a position they look at there. And then, you know, you've got your edge rushers. It's kind of a fairly deep edge rusher class. Would they use the number 2 pick on that position? I think if edge rusher is the position that they want to go in, that they would be far more interested in trading out so that they could drop back, pick up more draft picks, and maybe look at an edge rusher there. So I think those are kind of, you know, generally speaking, one position we know that they are not going to draft a running back at the number 2 spot. They're probably not going to, there's not an offensive lineman worthy of the number 2 overall pick. You know, you can, by process of elimination, you kind of know what they're not going to do, so you can see what they might do. But I do think, you know, and maybe they would take it. I just don't see them taking Marcus Mariota. I do not. I don't see them taking him. I don't think that is the kind of quarterback that Ken Whisenhunt wants. So, you know, if he's there and they're wanting to draft a quarterback, I think Jameis Winston would be the pick.
Got it. Yeah, it's interesting, just the Leonard Williams idea. You know, you talk about teams drafting to play against their division. And, you know, with Andrew Luck and, you know, that Colts offense, you'd think that defensive front would be a big priority for them, but, you know, we'll see. Transitioning.
The defensive front is really kind of the area where they at least have strong numbers there. Now, I wouldn't say that they're elite there. You know, Jarrell Casey is a guy who, you know, they just gave him a nice big extension. He's a guy that they can count on. He's a very, very, very good player. You know, he is a guy that if they got just a little bit better around him, you know, he could possibly put up Hall of Fame numbers. He's almost there right now. He's doing so well. But, you know, and that's kind of the thing when I think about Leonard Williams. And he is a guy that has that talent that you're willing to expend that high draft pick on. But, you know, I wouldn't say that they would do it, you know, just because, you know, they need a defensive lineman, because I do think defensive line is probably one of their strengths. Now, they have other areas that's not. You know, and of course they could move away from Samuel Lee Hill and some of these other guys too, but still they have guys there that can get it done. I think I think that they would agree with this. The secondary is a far more concern to the Tennessee Titans than their defensive line is.
Got it. So sticking with the offense for just one more question. Last year's second-round pick, who Matt and I both loved, Bishop Sankey, was uninspiring in his rookie season. Do you have any sense of what the organization feels about him at this point? And I guess along those lines, another guy behind him is Antonio Andrews, who's another second-year player. Any read on what the organization thinks about those two players?
Well, I'll take the second question first. Obviously, they're high on Antonio Andrews. Kind of a local kid, went to school in Kentucky. They're familiar with him. They do like him. He was on their practice squad. He was an undrafted free agent that they signed. He made it to their practice squad. And then when the Buffalo Bills expressed interest in signing him to their active roster, they made a move, made an offer, and moved him up to their active roster. And, of course, he was active for, I forget how many, 4 or 5 games maybe at the end of the season last year. But the curious thing about Antonio Andrews is that while you know that they like him and they had interest in him, he was on the active roster and active, but he didn't get a lot of playing time. And so it's kind of hard. It's hard to tell. And really the Titans didn't run the ball that much last year, which leads me to your first question, Bishop Sankey. I like Bishop Sankey too. You know, a lot of draft nicks, a lot of draft experts were kind of split on him. Some had him number 1, some had him and down on their list. I like Bishop Sankey too. A lot of Bishop Sankey's problems weren't something that you could isolate just to him. I mean, he was running at the end of the year when he was getting the most significant of his touches. He was running behind just a terrible offensive line because of injuries and whatnot, So, the Titans were pulling guys off the street to play along their offensive line. So, pump the brakes on the Bishop Sankey is a bust stuff. He's not a bust. I think that, and I tried to caution people about this before the season ever started. Ken Wisenhunt, first of all, he likes veterans. And second, he likes to throw the ball. I don't think that we're ever going to see the Titans be a run-heavy offense under Ken Wisenhunt. And I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with that. That's his DNA. That's what he does. I will be extremely shocked if, here's my caution to fantasy owners. I would be very, very bullish. I would avoid, let me put it this way, I would avoid Titans running backs until we see if that mindset is going to change. I just don't think that it's going to. I went back and looked at the numbers from his time coaching the Arizona Cardinals. And of course, he was the offensive coordinator for, I don't know how long you guys have played fantasy football, but I can remember when he was the offensive coordinator for the Pittsburgh Steelers, and fantasy players were crying because they had, who was that guy, the fast guy that they had? But Jerome Bettis kept vulturing all the touchdowns. Willie Parker. Fast Willie Parker. Yeah. So, just be careful about Titans running backs if you're a fantasy football player and owner. You probably don't want to rely too heavily. I think Bishop Sankey is going to be the guy going forward. Sean Green, I don't think is going to last. He's going to get released at some point. May have already, as they just released Bernard Pollard. So the cuts are starting. So we will see. But I think Bishop Sankey is going to be the guy for what that's worth, and I don't think that's worth very much.
Thanks for that. A lot of great information. One more question, and we'll let you go. Is there any future work of yours that we should look for?
Well, doing a lot of stuff. I cover the Titans, and because they're local, I can't really avoid them. But I'm going to be doing some different stuff, and I'm actually covering, as you mentioned, I'm covering the entire National Football League for NFLfemale. So be sure to check out our weekly updates on what's going on in the league. And I'm also doing some interesting things for Pro Player Insiders. Interesting project coming up for them that I hope to be able to announce very soon. So be on the lookout for that. You mentioned the Zone Blitz, our weekly Tuesday night webcast. Always a lot of fun. We're talking NFC South this week, the dreadful NFC South, which amazingly enough wasn't the worst division in football last year. The AFC South took that title. And game over with Vashti and Sharona. We're going strong, and we'll be back Friday. We'll be talking NBA. We'll have to talk about free agency and the upcoming draft. So stay tuned in for that.
All right, great. Thanks for your time. You take care.
Thanks for having me.